Today on Clearing the Clutter Inside and Out, we're talking about how clearing clutter supports inner success. Do you wonder what spiritual clutter is? Are you aware of the impact of emotional clutter? Would you like to understand how having gratitude supports you in releasing clutter? Let's continue our month focusing on clearing clutter with Julie Coraccio podcast interviews.
Ready to clear your clutter and share your gifts with the world? Every Tuesday at 1 p.m., join award-winning professional organizer, author, and certified life coach Julie Coraccio on clearing the clutter inside and out as she teaches you how to navigate the waters to declutter your life. Julie Coraccio destroys the box and examines clutter in all areas: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, energetic, relationships, health, finances, and more.
Charles Rivers and Demetrius Brown host Inner Success Radio and TV, which is a weekly show with inspiring interviews from all walks of life. Find them at innersuccessradio.com. They have lots of good synergy and were enjoyable to interview with because they are very interested in the subject and had lots of questions. Don't forget, your take actions are at the end of the interview. Enjoy!
Would you like to begin a series of strategies that will propel you into achieving personal mastery? Do you desire to have breakthroughs in unlocking your potential? Do you seek to live a life that is full of joy, peace, and happiness? Each week, join Charles and Demetrius as they share tools and strategies that will help you take control of your life so you can live a life of peace, joy, and abundance. Now here are your hosts, Charles and Demetrius.
And welcome back to another exciting episode of Inner Success Radio. This is Chuck Rivers alongside Billionaire Brown, where each week we bring on inspiring guests to help you unlock your full potential, and today's show is not going to be any different. But before we get into today's show and talk with today's guest, we'll go ahead and throw it over to Demetrius for the question of the day.
Here we go. Here's the question of the day. All right, Chuck, we're going to throw it over to you first. So let's get going. All right, so here we go. UFC fighters will beat each other up till someone taps out or someone gets knocked out unconscious. And right after the fight, they hug and they show respect to the other opponent, whether they win or lose. Chuck, what I wanted you to do, and Julie, we're going to come to you as well, is I want to know if you could tell me a time in your life where you lost at something and you still showed great sportsmanship. It doesn't have to be in sports. It could be in life. We lose at life every day. So again, for those of you that are listening to us on the treadmill at the gym, and also for those of you that consistently and faithfully listen to us while driving to work each morning, again, tell me one time in your life where you lost and you still showed great sportsmanship.
So there was a time where I was going for a supervisor position within where I was working, and I was, at the time, what I had thought was the most qualified person because I was team lead. I was getting different awards from the director, and literally everybody within the particular department thought I was going to be the supervisor. I interviewed for it, and then all of a sudden I know some lady, so I didn't get the job, and then some lady who wasn't even within the department, didn't have any knowledge of the whole process, and just totally unrelated to what she was doing previously, had got the position. And what I came to find out was that her mother was one of the directors for the call center. So at the end of the day, I figured it was pretty much political, but I still supported the supervisor when she was there. Still was a team lead to her, and congratulated her for getting the position. It's a tough position to fill, and she was able to get it. So that was one of the times where I had to show good sportsmanship and not feel some type of way and be negative towards her, because it was just one of those things where, hey, it was what it was. So.
All right, we can respect that, and thank you so much for sharing a story with us. So let's go, Julie. I mean, what's one thing that you've lost at in your life, and even though you lost, you showed great sportsmanship?
Well, I love this question. I'm actually going to share a sports story because I grew up playing sports and was very athletic. And I love this question. It's very interesting because I don't know a lot about the UFC. Do you know, did the women do the same thing after they have fought? Do they get up and hug? Is that pretty standard?
To my understanding, yeah, boxing as well as UFC, they shake hands right after they win. They hug each other. So I'm not sure about the women. I never seen one. I saw Ronda Rousey highlights, but I never seen an actual women's UFC match.
Okay, so for all your women listeners, listen to this because I think women, truly, we fail a lot at this. We can be catty and not great, whereas I think most of the times men can do that, beat each other and shake it off, and they move forward. So for me, I played ice hockey growing up. That was the sport that I was the best at, and I was always a team player, always the most improved. And then my senior year was up for the most valuable player, and I lost. And that was really hard for me because I had a great year and I'd really put in a lot of effort. And obviously I gave the woman that won a hug and congratulated her. And what has stuck with me my entire life is I'm not always the most valuable, but the most improved. And I'm okay with that because I'm constantly trying to be a better woman. I'm constantly trying to be better in business and do everything. So that was something that I could take away. And, you know, sometimes it goes your way and sometimes it doesn't. And you just have to roll with life.
Wow, that's really good. That's really, really good. All right, so ice hockey. We also had Chuck with experience at the workplace. And mine is every single week I lose, right? I'm a big player of ping pong. I'm not the greatest ping pong player, but every single weekend I go out and play ping pong with the fellas. And it's an amazing experience. I lose a lot. Right. But I believe I win more than I lose for any of my friends that's listening. So one thing that I make it a point of doing, whether I win or lose a match, every single time I shake the other person's hand. And the reason why I shake the other person's hand, no matter what sport I'm playing, even when I play a pickup game of basketball, is I had this one experience at my job way back. And I won this top producer trip and they flew us out to Mexico, had to stay in a 5-star place. And one of the people at the job that I was with, that I was competing with, once they announced me as the winner, he said, and I'll never forget, he said it in front of everybody. He said, and this was my friend, he said, "I hope you guys' plane doesn't crash." He didn't say congratulations. He didn't say no. He just said, "I hope you guys' plane doesn't crash." And that really rubbed me the wrong way. And I think that had a serious impact on, because I used to be a sore loser also, but that defining moment made me switch. So no matter what I'm doing that's competitive, whether I win or lose, I always make sure to acknowledge the other person's effort and shake the other person's hand. So that's my story and I'm sticking to it. Back over to you, Chuck.
All right. Thanks, Demetrius. And thanks, Julie, for sharing. So Julie, welcome to Inner Success Radio. Thanks for coming on and sharing with us.
Thanks for having me. And I love Inner Success. This is so wonderful. You guys are sharing your passion and talents on your radio show.
Now, Julie, how do we pronounce your last name?
It's Coraccio.
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 I married a nice Italian boy.
All right.
Coraccio. Did I say it right?
Yep, Coraccio.
All right. Chuck and I are really big on pronouncing names, so if we say it too much, we're just practicing. Coraccio.
Yeah. Coraccio. All right. Julie Coraccio is an award-winning professional organizer, author, and certified life coach who supports people in getting organized and clearing clutter in all areas of their lives. She is the host of the popular podcast Clearing the Clutter Inside and Out. Happily married to Tony and mommy to 2 rescued black cats, Joey and Antonio. Julie is based in Raleigh, North Carolina. When not clearing her own clutter, she enjoys cooking, reading, learning, hiking, and bubble baths. So, Julie, one of the things that we always like to figure out, one of the first things we like to figure out when we bring on guests for the show is the path that you take, the path that you're on. Mm-hmm. So give us a little bit about your background, how you got into the work that you're doing today.
Well, my background had been in fundraising. I had been a director of development and I had taken a job. I'd been living in Los Angeles and I wanted to move closer to family, which is in West Virginia. And I'm someone who really honors my intuition. And I woke up one day and said, I'm going to move to Raleigh, North Carolina without knowing a soul. But I trusted that inner guidance. And so my background had been in fundraising, and I took a job that was the worst job I'd ever had in my adult life. I called the old place Crazy Town because it was just one of those places where people were really negative, people were really angry. There was always an emergency. And I thought, okay, there's got to be something better than this. So what can I do that I would enjoy doing, but could also make a living and that I would be good at? And so I came up with organizing, and I started my business, Healing Through Organization, in 2009. And also I had started an internet TV show a couple years after that called Reawaken Your Brilliance. And I had this aha moment. While I believe you can heal through organization, I realized, you know what? It's really about the clutter. If we clear the clutter, that's going to make more phenomenal changes than just getting organized. And I'm passionate about supporting people and clearing their clutter, because when they do that, they can share their gifts with the world, because they get rid of what's not important and can focus on what is.
So, Julie, so what do we say to people that say, oh, I need a cluttered desk in order to function? Like where I work, my supervisor, his desk is ferocious. Like I sometimes I just can't walk in there because it's like so much stuff in his desk. But he says, you know, hey, I need my desk to be cluttered in order to function. Is that accurate, or is there something else going on there?
I don't believe that that's accurate. Now, it's funny. I just saw something, you know, things get passed around on Facebook and social media a lot, saying that people with messy desks were more creative. I don't know scientifically whether or not that's true, but, you know, you just mentioned walking in there and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't take it. You know, everything's energy. So when you have that cluttered, it's mess, it's hard to think. You know, think about being in your boss's office, your supervisor's office, and then being in your office where the clutter is cleared. You can naturally think easier. And I would say to you, you know, I worked with a coworker like that at my last job, and I'd say, hey, I need this. And I'm like, okay, I'll come back in a half an hour when you found it, because you're wasting time trying to find things. You can, if you're a creative person, what I like to suggest is, you know how you have usually at a business, those mail cubby holes for everyone's mail. Those are great for creative people, because if you have a bunch of different projects, like if you have your radio show, and maybe you have an idea for a book you're writing, you can keep all those little ideas in organized, clutter-free holes that have all of your stuff, and you can still find it easily and it's not cluttered. So I will always argue till the cows come home that the boss's desk of a cluttered desk is not the way to go.
And I agree 100%. So, Julie, what particularly is clutter? I know it's like, well, what do you mean what is clutter? But I know it's deeper than just defining clutter. But what specifically is clutter?
Well, here's what I consider clutter. To me, clutter is stagnant energy. You know, you talked about feeling how your boss's office felt. It's delayed decisions. If you have a pile of stuff that you haven't made a decision on, that's clutter. That tends to be when we go, okay, I'll think about this later. And then that pile morphs into clutter. And I consider clutter anything that prevents you from living the life you choose, deserve, and desire. And clutter is not just physical. We get hung up on the clutter being just physical, but it's way more than that.
Awesome.
Give us an example of way more than physical.
It is mental. So, hey, do you have monkey mind? Or do you have one of these minds that you can never shut off? Or are you someone that's always picking apart something? I should have said this. I should have done that. Do they like me? Do they not like me? You also have, and I believe, emotional clutter. Do you allow your emotions to be expressed, or do you stuff them down? Because remember, it's going to come out in some way, shape, or form. Or are you someone that gets angry inappropriately because you can't control your emotions? And then I also believe we have spiritual clutter, which to me can be gossiping. It can be comparing yourself to others. It can be not following your passion. There's energetic clutter, which is, you know, how does your room feel? If you're at home, does it feel peaceful, or does it feel kind of frazzled or stressed? Relationship clutter, who are you hanging out with? You know, the people that are closest to you determine your life in some sense. They found that if people are overweight, or if you hang out with a lot of people that are overweight, you're most likely to become overweight. And are you hanging out with people that say, yeah, you can do it, or tell you every reason in the book why you can't do it? And then health. If you have a cluttered kitchen, maybe you're relying on takeout because you can't find your cookware to cook a healthy meal. So clutter really, to me, expands into all areas.
Anxious? Exhausted? Stressed out? Losing your mind? Ready to get your life back? Go to reawakenyourbrilliance.com to learn how Julie Coraccio can support you.
All right, so I'm going to hit you with a few random questions during this show. My first one is, I have this strong belief, and I don't know if it's clutter or not, but maybe you're the right person I need to ask this to. A cracked cell phone, what it does to me mentally, not just when I have it, like if I ever crack my phone, which is rare, okay, I have to get it fixed like right away. Like I can't, it becomes like an instant priority because every time I see a cracked phone, it does something to me mentally. Did you come across any type of, what is your thoughts on that? Is that a sense of clutter as well? A cracked cell phone and having a cracked cell phone for way too long?
Well, I think it's individual. That to you is most definitely clutter because you mentioned that it drives you crazy mentally. So you've got to get it fixed. They talk about in feng shui how you want to take care of things. And, if you have 30 things that are dirty or ripped or stained, like for instance with clothes, or if you have a bunch of rusty tools, what message are you sending out there? What are you saying to the universe? You're saying you don't take care of your things. So I believe in taking care of your things. And if something's broken, fix it, because I look at kind of the larger picture of it. But what's important also in your question is if it's clutter to you, then that's what's most important. If someone else, it wouldn't drive them crazy and it still functions, and do it. But I would always go back to kind of the feng shui thing saying, hey, take care of your stuff, because that's what you're saying energetically.
Okay, thank you for clearing that up. And my other random question that I wanted to give to you, since I heard your bio, I had to ask you this. You have 2 black cats, you and your husband, Tony?
We do, and Antonio's hanging out with us in the studio now. He is in his little cat tree looking out, checking out all the birdies.
Hey, Antonio.
Hey, Antonio. All right, so I read this. I used to always watch this movie. Well, put it this way. I didn't always like cats. I actually hated cats. And I was one of those idiots who had to choose dogs or cats, which doesn't make any sense at all. So one day I went to a Barnes & Noble's bookstore and I said, you know what? Today I want to pick a book that I really know nothing about and I hate for no reason. So the librarian there, they said, all right, well, what don't you like? And for some reason I said cats. So he found me this book called Homer's Odyssey by Gwen Cooper. And have you ever read the book?
I haven't.
Oh my goodness. All I'm going to tell you is that I, for one, as a cat lover, which you probably are, you should definitely pick up the book by Gwen Cooper. It's called Homer's Odyssey. It's about this blind cat, and it's a real story, and it absolutely changed my whole perspective on cats. I was just curious to know, what is one thing that you really love about your 2 cats?
You know what? Because they remind me every day what's most important. Because if I'm having a bad day, they're there to, do snuggie time. And that's really what it's about. And I encourage, I'm very active on social media, and adopt, don't shop, don't buy more stuff, save an animal. There's so many animals out there that are in need, and talk about your stuff can't love you, but cats and dogs can love you unconditionally. And I have to just share with you, I was never a cat person either. I met my husband. I got married later in life. We got married very quickly after meeting, and he had a cat. And I remember thinking, oh, it's too bad. Things started out really well. Had a couple dates, went armed with my homeopathy stuff, my, heavy drugs, no issue with Joey. And so it's been this amazing journey. I'm constantly and still discovering how great cats are. So it's been a lot of fun. So if you're allergic, don't give up, because I'm not anymore.
Me neither.
That's wonderful. Yay, you're a cat person.
Yeah, buddy.
So Julie, it sounds like your work revolves around the I guess this new wave of the minimalist. Have you heard of that movement, the minimalist movement?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I was really intrigued by it because it seems like it kind of aligns with what you're doing, right? Teaching people how to clear clutter, because the whole concept of minimalism is, how can you operate throughout life with as less stuff as possible. When they say stuff, it could be mental, emotional stuff as well. How did you take on this your this clutter philosophy, because you look at it a little differently than most people, right? Because a lot of times when we think of clutter, we think of a cluttered desk, right? We think of a bunch of papers piled up, books everywhere. We think of a cluttered house, but you go a little deeper than that. You're talking about emotional, mental, spiritual clutter, relationship clutter. So how did you take on this different approach to clutter?
Well, really it was evolved from, so when I was working in organization, I told you earlier, my business had been healing through organization. One of the things when I'm working on with people one-on-one is I'm coaching, because I want you to hire me. Let's get it fixed and let's figure out what the clutter is really about, so you don't have to hire me again, because I want you on your happy way, sharing your gifts with the world. And so I had a client, and meanwhile I'd been doing the show, and I'd had people like Peter Walsh and the Fly Lady, and clutter kept coming up from different body, mind, and spirit people. And so I was working with this woman, and she said, can we just talk? And usually if I'm talking, I'm also doing. And I was like, okay, she obviously needed my full attention, and I honor what my clients need. And so I work in a 4-hour block, so you can see that you've made progress. And we probably spent 3.5 hours talking. And the last half hour we spent actually doing the organizing. And she said to me, you don't know how much this has helped me, because we were figuring out where the clutter started and digging deeper. And I say that a lot, dig deeper. What's it really about? Because there's so many layers of things that we have going on. And so after I left, she emailed me. She said, oh my gosh, it was great after you left. I organized, come back again so we can talk. So it was kind of that aha moment. Okay, there's more to it. It's just not the physical. And then in my personal work, I'm a huge fan of personal development. I work with a coach. I have a women's group, a class that I take 2 classes a month. And so kind of as I've learned in that and grown, I bring that into my business, because I just feel like, we're all unique, we're all special, and life beats us down, or a teacher tells us something in 2nd grade that stays with us for 20 years and says, you can't do it, you're not good enough, you're not worthy. And that's so not true. We are unique and have our gifts to share with the world, but it's like, okay, what's that clutter? What's preventing us? And so I see my job as supporting people to figure out, okay, hey, this is a clutter, let's clear it and move forward.
And I want to allude to, so Demetrius talked about the cracked iPhone screen earlier, but I have a similar question in relation to that. So I have an iPhone as well, and I have a bunch of apps on here. For some reason or another, I've convinced myself that I need all these apps, right? I was at work today trying to delete some of them, but I was going through and saying, well, I don't need all these apps, right? It's just, I just feel like there's too much on my iPhone screen. So, and people may think, well, that's that's just that's small, right? But it's not, right? If that's something that's a clutter to you, then it's, to me personally, it's taking up mental space, right? Because I'm thinking about it like, oh my goodness, I got to get this stuff off my phone. It's just so many apps. So, is that something along the lines of the same thing, or is it completely off? Or
no, I think you're 100% right. Again, because it is it's driving you crazy, and our cell phones can absolutely become clutter. And maybe what it might be for you, I found sometimes with people, especially if they have this fear of losing information. And so I don't know if that's the case with you, but if you have all these apps, like you're afraid you're going to miss something, or, the latest sports news, or you're afraid you're going to miss if your stock's gone down or gone up or whatever. But sometimes with people, they have this fear that, they're not going to have what they need or lose information. And what I say is trust that you'll get what you need when you need it, because our point of power in our lives is the present moment. The past has happened. I can't change that. The future's written in pencil. I can plan, and then life might throw me a curveball, because there are a lot of factors outside of my control. So I would say trust that you'll get what you need when you need it. Take the time to clear the clutter from your phone, because that's obviously, driving you nuts.
All right. And I hosted a training call. Matter of fact, it was last night for network marketing business. And the topic that I had was how to organize your business. And I gave them 5 tips that I thought was really good for organizing their business. One of them was, and it's funny, Chuck was talking about his boss's office. One of the 5 things that I listed was get rid of office supplies, because most of them work from home. Get rid of your office supplies that you haven't used in the past year. What do you think about that? the office, your office stuff that you're not using for, like, you haven't used it in a year and it's just sitting there. What do you think about that?
I love that. I think that was a great tip. You got a gold star. Very good job. And, I work from home too. Everything's run. I have where we're talking now. Everything's here. And so think about it. That's where you want to create abundance. So if you have clutter, like any book you read on feng shui, which for people who aren't familiar, it's a Chinese system that if you want it, like you have what's called the Bagua, if you want to improve your relationships or health or career, there are different areas in the house that correlate. And so it's all done kind of from an energetic perspective, but every book says clear clutter. So if you're making a living and wanting to create abundance, clutter energetically says stop. And, I think the other tip I'd say is think about real estate. If you have documents that you use all the time, keep those on your desktop. Oh, hey, you need my client agreement. Here you go. So you don't have to go through searching for it. And think about, okay, the papers that I use all the time, let's have those handy. So if I need to pull out a file to reference that. So think of in terms of what you use the most, have that close by.
And so what do you think about people who have like 3 or 4 different emails, 3 or 4 different calendars? We have somebody, they use Evernote, they use Google Drive, they use OneNote. So they have all these applications that they're using to, I guess, try and organize their life. But to me, it appears that it seems that that's more confusing when you have all that energy dispersed everywhere.
Oh, I would agree. And I would be shocked if something has not fallen through the cracks with them. Yeah. Because what I always say to people, have one calendar. Have one list of your contacts. Now, I use Evernote, but I use that to house my recipes. So if I like it, it makes it onto Evernote. So, but Evernote doesn't have my contacts. It's not my calendar. I think that is I would find that very difficult, even for a highly organized person, to be able to keep track of all that. I always suggest one calendar, one list for contacts, that they're spreading themselves way too thin on that.
Could you give us an example of emotional clutter?
Absolutely. One of my favorites. So an example of emotional clutter would be not expressing your feelings. So, if you feel grief or loneliness or heartbreak, obviously that's understandable why you would want to not express that. But we create stories we tell ourselves, and guilt and shame and depression, emptiness, all that stuff just creates stories around that. So why would you want to feel that or keep bringing that story up and up again? Because if you don't feel your feelings, I mentioned earlier, things will express themselves in some way, shape, or form. And so it's really important. I'm a recovering emotional eater, and I've gotten a lot better than I have in the past. But again, like that would come out in some way, like I would get really angry over something stupid. And that's because I hadn't been expressing real anger over things that were really worth getting angry. So I'd encourage people, give yourself permission to feel. It doesn't matter. I see so many times, especially we have these people on social media, you shouldn't feel anger, you shouldn't feel shame. Don't listen to that. Whatever you need to feel, honor it and do it. And try not to judge an emotion as good or bad. Anger can be a great catalyst for change. We see a lot of anger in this country, and it's going to result in change. So in that way, it's really good. So don't judge it. And just remember that unpleasant feelings are a part of life. Carl Jung said, what you resist persists. So if you accept your feelings and you allow it to come up, then it can be released and it's not stuck in there. So my biggest thing is feeling your feelings to not create emotional clutter.
That's awesome. And so I'm going to have to obviously make sure that everybody listens to this, because one of the other tips that I did leave last night was actually using one calendar for your business, which takes me to my question about just leadership and, helping people achieve their goals. I'm interested to know, how do you feel about getting a good night's sleep? Does that play a part in the way we clutter our minds just voluntarily, getting a good night's sleep? Or because some people say, you see some successful people, they'll say, I got to sleep 8 hours a day. Usually the more wealthy the people are, the more they sleep, about 8 hours a night. But then you have some rich people that say, I don't sleep at all. I sleep 2 or 3 hours a night. What's your take on that? Does getting a really good night's sleep play a major part in uncluttering or decluttering our minds so we could be more efficient?
I agree with you 1,000%. And I actually just did a podcast this month. My theme was thinking outside the box on clutter. And I talked about getting a good night's sleep and how if we don't, for instance, if you're tired all the time. Now, I will say, I think everything's individual. I would say the majority of us need a good 8 hours of quality sleep. Maybe there's some people out there that can sleep for 4 hours. I don't know. I have yet to meet someone that is successful that does that. So if you're exhausted, you're going to be mentally drained. You know, you're not going to want to eat healthy food. You're not going to want to go to the gym. So I think that just for decluttering your life and being successful, absolutely sleep is 100% important.
Paid late fees because you can't find your bills? Child miss out on a field trip because of a lost permission slip? Missing out on reimbursements because you can't find your receipts? Go to reawakenyourbrilliance.com to learn how Julie Coraccio can assist you.
I know that you talk a lot about, actually before we get into that, so you defined emotional clutter for us. Can you give us an example, or what do you consider spiritual clutter to be?
Okay, I'm going to talk about gossip because I don't read magazines, and Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt, the internet has gone in overdrive. I can't miss it. It's everywhere. And, you know, like I skim news because I want to be an informed citizen, and this is everywhere. And the articles, it's just crazy. But I would encourage people to look at, do you gossip? Do you gossip about friends? Are you ready for the next People magazine to come through the door? To me, gossip is a waste of time because joining in someone's pain or someone's sorrow, how is that helping anyone? It's not supporting you. It's not supporting anyone. You know, we had a neighbor that just sold a house and it's been on the market for a while. And the scuttlebutt around the neighborhood was that it was foreclosed on. Well, and they had an open house. I went and asked the realtor. I'm like, I'm going to go straight to the source. Well, that wasn't true. But what if that had gotten back to the person's employer? You just don't know. And it was untrue because so gossip can end up being harmful. So you need to be really aware of that. And what I say about gossip is, you know, it's really easy to talk smack about someone else, and it's more difficult to spend time on bettering ourselves. So that to me is why? Then the question is, why do you feel the need to take sides and support Jennifer Aniston and who's been divorced from Pitt for how many years now? You know, I mean, what's your thing? Because that's about you. That has nothing to do with either of them. When you're doing those things, it's how you respond is about you. How others react is about them. So that's just an example of spiritual clutter.
All right, so let me step in here real quick with this gossiping because it's one of my pet peeves as well. And you see a lot of I used to gossip and I used to allow people to gossip. So I'm coming from a perspective of experience of gossiping. And I'm curious to know your take on, because the way that I get out of gossip, people don't know. It's hard to get, if someone's talking to you about something you don't want to talk to, especially if it's a loved one, it's really hard to not let them gossip in front of you. And maybe my way might be too brash of avoiding gossip, the things that I say. What are some things for the person that's listening to us that they're in a network of people, their circle of influence is always gossiping? What would you recommend would be a stepping stone to getting out of that environment or avoiding it or letting people know not to, do that around you?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we are who we hang out with. So if you've grown, and that would be my word, again, there's no judgment right or wrong or good or bad on this. And if you've outgrown, I've outgrown friends. And again, that's not a bad or a good thing. And now gossip bothers you because before you did gossip and you engaged in that. So the thing is, okay, well, are these the people that I want to hang out with? Maybe I need to widen my circle and meet more people, or say, hey, you know what, guys, this was fun, but I've done some self-reflection. I don't want to gossip. So if you all gossip, hey, that's okay, but I'm going to need to step away from the conversation. Or if we're one-on-one, I'm going to stop you. I really hope you will support me in honoring this and stopping the gossip, because you have the power to create new relationships. You have the power to say no, and you have the power to walk away.
Yeah, and Les Brown, I'm not sure if you know him. He put the forward on my Silver Dollar ebook. He always says, listen, if you can't change the people that's around you, change the people that's around you. And I just know for a fact, like, it is so difficult. And I appreciate the way that you just answered that question. Just let them know. And I feel that when you do let people know, they at least kind of adjust their conversation when you're in their presence.
Absolutely. But remember, it's not your job to change anyone.
Yeah.
It's not. It's I would say most of us, and I am including myself in this statement, have enough stuff to make ourselves better and improve our lives to worry about others. And I used to feel like it was my job to save everyone. I need to stop people from getting hurt. No more. I don't do that anymore. I concentrate on me.
That's hard in itself, right?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And to kind of stay on this topic just a little bit, one of the things that always baffles me, and of course I don't judge them, that's their decision, but sometimes people that I'm in conversations with, and they'll ask me, oh, have you seen this show, or have you heard what happened to this actor or this actress? I'm like, but they know more about this person's personal life when their own life is not, it's not to where it could potentially be. So. And sometimes I seem disconnected, and I don't know if that's rude or not during those conversations, because they're asking me, "Oh, have you seen this? Have you heard?" Like, no, I haven't. But one of the things is, like, if you just refocus some of that energy towards yourself, like if you reflected some of that energy towards yourself, it's amazing. And I always tell this story. I had a friend when I was going to Morgan. He unfortunately passed away, but during my freshman year at Morgan, we would sit down and watch football games on Sunday, and I would kid you not, NFL games. He would be able to read off every single college every single player went to on every team. It was amazing. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, wow, man! If you just redirected that energy towards something more meaningful than knowing what college NFL player went to, you can make some massive change. So. When it comes to the clutter, like, and I think this could tie along with the mental clutter, is that, hey, you got your mind cluttered with the knowledge of the college NFL players went to.
Well, I would say, again, I think everything's so individualized. And if that is a passion of his, then I say it's okay. But what I want to know, and what I would look at is, okay, you have this passion, but is it interfering with your life? So, for example, when we talked about gossip a moment ago, when we're gossiping, then usually that's a way to feel better about ourselves. Well, at least I don't cheat on my husband like she did, or, at least I'm not anorexic like she is. So that's to make ourselves feel better about us. And if he's doing this in the football teams is his passion, and it's not bringing in something negative like that, then I think it's okay, if that makes sense. Now, if he's spending so much time that it's interfering in his relationship with his significant other, then that's where I'd say, okay, it's perhaps become clutter. It's created clutter in your relationship. What do you need to do to change that? And that would be my thought about that.
Awesome. Now, I want to flip scripts a little bit. So we were talking a little bit about gossip, but I want to talk about the other side of gossip, and that's gratitude. How does gratitude relate to clutter?
I love this. I would say, I just think gratitude is just amazing. And if one thing can change your life, it's having gratitude. Everything's energy. Love and gratitude are of the highest vibration. So you can't hold two opposing thoughts at once. So you can't be like, oh, I don't have anything in my life and be in gratitude. So not having gratitude can create physical clutter, because if we aren't thankful for what we have, we might always try to buy more to fill that hole. But if we have gratitude, then we're thankful for what we have. And it can create other clutter, like spiritual clutter, because we're stuck in comparing ourselves instead of being like, oh my gosh, I'm awesome. Then, oh, I'm not as thin as she is. I'm not as pretty as she is. So when we have gratitude, we can raise our vibration and attract a life we choose. What are people grateful for? This whole year, I'm sharing a daily gratitude. My Facebook page is public. And so I have felt really moved this year to post a gratitude every day. So every day you'll see what I'm grateful for. Sometimes it's long, sometimes it's really short, but if you're wondering, hey, do I have gratitude, or if I'm mainly a positive person, go back and look at your social media, see what you're posting, because a lot of times we're on autopilot, we aren't aware of it. And most times we're complaining. We're not hanging out in gratitude. And even if you're in a challenging space right now, try and have gratitude for basic things. You're able to read. Most of us have access to clean water. Most of us have a roof over our head, at least in America. Most of us have health insurance. Try and find, even if you're having a rough day, that golden nugget of finding gratitude. And even if you are having trouble, just be real about it. Don't try to be fake about it. Just, you know what, I'm struggling. I mean, there was a time I didn't have much gratitude in my life, and my friend was over at my house, and she was like, look around you. Look around you. And it was like a energetic slap on the face, but she was right. And I needed that wake up call. And the more gratitude I've had, the better my life has become.
All right. With that being said, I'm very curious now, Julie. First, who does do you personally do your free 30-minute consultations for coaching, or do you have somebody else do it and then you come in and do the work?
Oh, no, it's always me, because I think it's very important to make sure that that we're a good match for each other.
Okay. So the punchline to that question is, I'm very interested to know what is the most common reason that people come to you for coaching as far as decluttering. Is it the spiritual? Is it the health? Is it the workplace? Like, what's the most common reason that people actually come to you for help?
I would say, and again, as I've said throughout the podcast, everything's really individualized, but I would say, if I had to sum it up, that people are stuck in their life, they aren't happy, and they don't, what do I do? And they can't figure out what's going on. What do I need to shift to change that, to be happy and to move forward in life?
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Now, when people have physical clutter in their space, is that usually a derivative of something going on in the spiritual? Is that, because I know a lot of times they say there's a quote that's saying, you know, as within, so without, as above, so below. So if there's physical clutter on the outside, if somebody's desk is cluttered, your house is cluttered, does that particularly mean that there's an issue going on spiritually?
Well, I believe that the inner and outer are, like you said, as above, so below, are definitely related, and one will influence the other. So, for instance, if you start to clean your physical environment, that can help clear inner clutter, and vice versa. It really, I can walk into a home and have a sense, is there overwhelm here, or is there anxiety, or is there sadness? So not always, like, for instance, say you just had a baby and you didn't have a lot of clutter, but life's kind of crazy now because you're not sleeping and you've got a newborn. You might have what's called situational clutter. And as soon as things settle down, your physical clutter can go away. But usually I find that, and a lot of times depression can cause clutter, and clutter can cause depression. So if you're out there and you're feeling blue, start to work on clearing your physical environment. It can definitely make an impact on that.
Is making your bed in the morning a good place to start for the physical decluttering?
Oh, you know what? That question, this put a chuckle on my face. I was very close. I had a woman who was like a second mother to me, and she was just one of these people who loved life and worked every ounce of it. And she said to me, she was someone who had stage 4 cancer for like 15 years. They're just like, we give up. We don't know when you're going to die, because she had such a wonderful attitude about life. And she told me, she was like, I've stopped making the bed. She was from Louisiana. And she said, because I'm just going to go back in it at night. And that's something that always stuck with me, that I thought was kind of funny. You know what? I think there's something to be said for making your bed every morning, kind of starting your day. You can think of the intent of how you'd like to start your day while you make your bed. And you know what? If you want to take Sybil's attitude that you're just going to get back in it at night, I'd say, hey, whatever makes you happy.
I was asking that question. How old are your children?
No children, just the cats.
Oh, no. Okay. All right. Because there's this football program where a lot of the national football players, they do a big thing in Raleigh once a year. And it's free. Like, it's totally free. It's like a foundation that they have. And my lady has 2 sons, but one 12 and one 13. And it was amazing. Hundreds of kids there, and I'm 100% sure most of them thought this camp was just going to be, we're going to play football, we're going to play football, we're going to play football. But here are these superstar athletes that they look up to. It was a 3-hour program, and maybe an hour and a half of the program was them talking about off the field things that will make them better on the field.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that they hung on was making their bed.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, all the parents was like, oh my goodness, they're telling them what we want to tell them, but they don't listen to us. So I think that was really huge. And they really played on, the things like making your bed and stuff like that get you to have a great day. So I thank you for also giving your take on it.
Well, I think that I would agree for kids. Absolutely. I think it's important to have them do chores. It's really important to teach kids early on to clear clutter and be organized, to have your school books in the same place so you don't forget one when you're off to school in the morning. I just worked with a family and the oldest was 10 at the time, and she struggled the most with letting things go, and her room was like a hurricane. But we worked together and, taught her things, and she said afterwards, she's like, mommy, my room feels really weird. And mommy was like, weird good or weird bad? And she said, weird good. And even she could see that. But teaching kids early on, I think it's so important, because if you teach them to be able to let things go when they no longer need them or are a priority. I worked with clients who are in their 60s who have stuff because they weren't taught those skills as a kid, and they weren't taught. I believe if you have things passed down to you, that when someone goes to the other side, they want you to be happy and healthy. And if it doesn't serve you, they want you to let it go. But I've worked with a lot of people who are like, I can't let it go. It's something in the family. So I think instilling, and I think that's great that the football camp did that. I think that's really important. And then when you're an adult, you can make a decision. That's how I look at it.
Surrounded by clutter? Exhausted from the stress and anxiety it creates? Longing for peace of mind? Go to reawakenyourbrilliance.com to learn how Julie Coraccio can assist you.
Awesome. And what's your take on hoarding?
That is, I don't work with hoarders. There's definitely deep psychological stuff going on there. And if you know someone who's a hoarder, I would definitely recommend with someone who's A, been trained in hoarding, and B, working with a psychologist. I'll just share a little example, which isn't hoarding, but is a tiny example of how things can become hoarding. I believe that there's definitely trauma that's happened there. And so I had a client who had a bunch of stuffed animals. Now, as a woman in her 40s, that wasn't typical. Most 40-year-old women don't have stuffed animals. Mm-hmm. But when she was a child, they had cleared out all her stuffed animals. Someone had gone in her room and gotten rid of stuff without her permission, and that caused trauma. So the trauma came out is, I'm going to buy all the stuffed animals that were taken away from me as a kid. So say if you've been abused, you can understand how having things around you could provide a sense of safety.
That is so fascinating. When something that can happen when you're a kid and into your adult years, 40 or 50 years old, can still have an unconscious psychological effect on you. That to me is just amazing how that works.
I think, and don't quote me on this, that they say that, like, is it from birth to 7, really everything's formed, and whatever happens in those years really influences you later on in life. And I will say this, just because that happened to you, you can heal from trauma, you can heal from abuse. I really believe that, not to get stuck, to know that you can heal.
Yeah, I agree. On the last episode, or it could have been the one before that, I was talking about a time when Tony Robbins had a guy come to see him who had a stuttering issue. And the guy was like 35, 36. He'd been stuttering his entire life. So through a series of questions, it came to find out that the kid started stuttering when he was, I think, 4 or 5 years old. And his father was beating his mother. And he used to watch Rocky and Bullwinkle. And whenever one of the characters would get into trouble, they would start stuttering. So he picked up the stuttering, and the beating stopped because it got so bad with him, they had to attend to him because of his stuttering. So his father no longer was beating on his mother. But he carried that with him through his entire life. So that just goes to show the power of, like you said, between the ages of 0 and 7, whatever happens during that time period can definitely have a major impact.
It does.
Now, I'm going to go off the cuff here, Julie, and because you mentioned a couple of things throughout today's episode. You mentioned the Bagua. You talk a lot about energy. And I've actually recently came across the Bagua astrology this past year, and it was really fascinating to me. I didn't even think about it until I heard it. How can people utilize Bagua astrology to help them declutter?
Well, I'm not a feng shui expert, but there are lots of great books out there that you can get. And so it's more the overall theme in feng shui is to clear your clutter. And then after that, so here's an example for people in business. So I'm sitting here in our office, and my desk, I can look at the door. And that's one of the tips that they have. They say, okay, be able to see business coming in. And for those of you that have a home office, you want to make sure that the driveway is clear, that it looks inviting. Even if people aren't coming to your home, think about your space. And again, because everything's energy. So there are different things to place. And in certain areas, like you want plants are a good idea that are about health. And they look at shapes, they look at colors, they look at different things like that. So for you people working from home, make sure your entryway is nice. There's no cluttering that. Again, you don't want clutter in your office, and have your desk face forward to welcome new business.
How long have you been in this career, Julie?
Since 2009.
All right, since 2009. What I'm curious to know, what was the worst case of cluttering that you've seen?
I don't consider, I'm trying to think, because I officially started in 2009, but one of the reasons I chose this career is when I'd been living in LA, people were like, oh, you're uptight. You can help me clear clutter and get organized. So I was doing it for a while. I wouldn't say worst case. I would say the most overwhelming case I had was recently, because the person had created 3 rooms in their home that was just extreme clutter. And what she had been doing, she had started to equate the clutter with safety. And so she didn't want to clear the clutter because that was a safety issue for her, because some things had happened in her life. So that was probably the most overwhelming, because the rest of the house, there wasn't any clutter, but were these 3 rooms of not hoarding, but extreme clutter. And underneath it all, she was really organized.
All right, so Julie, as we begin to wind down here, we do want to talk about the course that you have, How to Declutter Your Life course. Tell us, well, first we want to know, so when did you create this course?
I created this course last year. I wanted to create something for people who might not be able to do coaching. I have a lot of people who have said that are in rural areas that don't have an access to someone that's can help them clear clutter and get organized. And I also created it because time and time again, I see people get overwhelmed when they're trying to clear clutter. And so what I did is created a manageable step-by-step basic course on how to clear clutter physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And then I added on a bonus month of energetic clutter. But it's self-paced. It's either video or workbook, and you can take a year to do it, or you can finish earlier if you're motivated. And if they go to my website, reawakenyourbrilliance.com, you can see all the modules that are included. But I purposefully made it something that was easy and manageable because I want people to succeed. Because again, what drives me is when people clear their clutter, they can reawaken their brilliance and share their gifts with the world. And I choose to live in a world where people are living their gifts, they're being brilliant, and instead of not right now what we have going on.
Awesome. And I've myself particularly been inspired by today's show. Actually, once we finish up, I'm going to go look at my room and see how I can declutter some stuff.
Wonderful.
And, yeah, so definitely. What are 3 takeaways that people should take away from today's episode?
Okay, if I had to say 3 things. Clutter, think of clutter in more broad terms. Clutter is anything that prevents you from creating the life you choose, deserve, and desire. Where in your life do you have clutter? What one step can you do right now to clear your clutter? And then the second point would be, whatever is going on the inside is reflected on the outside. How do your inner and outer worlds look? And when you begin to make changes in one area of your life, it will positively affect the others. And then finally, Gratitude is attitude. Being in gratitude and love is the easiest way to clear your clutter because you cannot hold two opposing thoughts at once, meaning you can't complain and you can't be in gratitude. See if you can be grateful for one thing each and every day.
Dimitri, do you have any closing remarks or any final comments for Julie?
Yeah, sure. Well, I have two. The first one is, on a scale from 0 to 10, how great of an interview is this so far?
Oh, 10 for sure. I love your synergy. I think you guys have you work well together, and I like it. I've enjoyed it. Truly.
All right. We appreciate that. Now, here's my second question. I'm an avid reader. I love reading. I'm building up my library for the past couple of years, and I love the content that you're speaking about. I would love to know if you have any recommendations of any really good books that you've come across. So I can add that to my list as well.
I would highly recommend, and it's a short book, but I read this book on a regular basis. It's called The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz.
Did you hear that, Chuck?
Yeah.
Did you hear that, Chuck? Well, no, Julie, great book. But Chuck introduced us to that. You got to give me another one.
Okay, another one. Okay, even though you're a man, I'm going to recommend this as well. Women Who Run with the Wolves. I think that every woman should read it, and it would be great if men would read it as well. It's by Clarissa Pinkola Estes, who's a cantadora, which is a Mexican storyteller. But I just think, talk about spiritual clutter and inner clutter. This is a wonderful book that will get people thinking and clearing out their clutter. Right, let me think of one more, because that was for the women. And you have you read The 4 Agreements?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you've read it. Good job. Oh gosh, there's so many things that I like. I'm trying to peek over at my bookshelf to say, oh, you know what? I like, I would say the guy, The Peaceful Warrior, Dan Millman. Have you read that?
No, but I heard about it. And now, what's his name again?
Dan Millman.
Okay, I like that one.
So check out The Peaceful Warrior. But for those of you who haven't read The 4 Agreements, please, this is a short book. It is just fantabulous advice. And I know I talked about it at some point, but it's number 2. Don't take anything personally. What others do is about them. How you respond is about you.
Chuck, I know you're extremely... Listen, Chuck gave us that book, and someone else put it in their book club, and it took on a whole life of itself. So you saying that The 4 Agreements is a great book, that just helped out a ton of our listeners.
Yeah,
excellent.
Definitely. Yeah, we actually did an entire podcast. It may have been 2, talking about the 4 Agreements. And believe it or not, we had put a post on our Facebook fan page, and the author of The 4 Agreements liked our post. So
he's wonderful. I interviewed his son, Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., on his book, The Fifth Attachment. Reach out to him. I mean, you never say never. You just never know. I have to tell you, in my experience, when I've asked for interviews, the more famous someone was, the nicer they were. They promoted being on the show, and I'd say go for it. And he would, I think, would be a lovely interview.
Perfect. We'll definitely have him on the list then. Yeah, and that's true, because we asked him another one of our guests said the same thing. You know, we asked them, how can we grow our podcast? And they said, hey, reach out to, the quote unquote heavy hitters, reach out to people who you would typically think wouldn't respond back to. And it's like you said, you'll be surprised at how receptive and how open some of these people are willing to come on and share. So awesome.
And let me know if you interview them, because I want to listen.
I definitely will. Julie, do you have any final thoughts for us?
I do. Know that you're loved, worthy, and good enough. Because if I could break down clutter to 3 things, it would be those 3 things. In some way, shape, or form, we don't feel we're loved, worthy, or good enough. So know that you are. Practice self-kindness when working on reducing your clutter. Rome wasn't built in a day, and you won't break these habits in a day. So be patient and gentle with yourself. With time and practice, you'll put yourself on a path to living more fully. And then finally, go out, clear the clutter to create the life you choose, deserve, and desire. Take actions from today's podcast. Clear any clutter from your desk and organize what's left. Have the papers you need and use the most close by for easy access. What clutter other than physical clutter can you release? Go through your apps on your phone. Delete what you aren't using. Stop gossiping. Take a break if you regularly gossip or gossip with friends. Go out, clear the clutter to create the life you choose, deserve, and desire.
Perfect. And where can people find out more information about you?
If they go to reawakenyourbrilliance.com, all three little words put together, they can find out more information, and you can connect with me and find my social media links there, as well as a link to the podcast, Clearing the Clutter Inside and Out.
Perfect. And of course, I'll have links to these information all in the show notes when the show goes live, so people can have easy access to it. And Julie, I like to end the show with a scenario in the form of a question, I guess you can say. So a nonprofit organization has hired you to come in to work with their CEO. You realize the CEO has physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual clutter. Of those four, where would you start?
Well, when I work with people, I have them fill out a detailed assessment. So if just off the top of my head with not having a detailed assessment, I would begin work if there was anything pressing. For instance, the nonprofit's about to go under. I think we've got some financial clutter going on and we need to start there. So I would say, where's the biggest fire that needs to be put out immediately?
Perfect. Julie, thanks again for coming on, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Woo.
Ready to live a more joyful and fulfilling life? Sign up for our newsletter at reawakenyourbrilliance.com and receive a free copy of 10 Steps to Clearing Clutter Inside and Out. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate and review Clearing the Clutter Inside and Out. See you next Tuesday at 1 p.m.